Alright, so I just bought a new break barrel air gun, and I noticed that there were very little reviews. I didn't find one single review about the new Gamo Whisper Fusion Mach 1. I saw the Pigment Edition, which is pretty much the same thing. I thought it was anyway. Found a couple of written reviews, but this gun's pretty new, and I just didn't have a good time online, or didn't have an easy time online finding any good reviews to go off of, but I went for it and bought it anyway. I had some bad luck with a few Benjamins I recently bought and decided to give Gamo a try. But anyway, this is the new Whisper Fusion Mach 1. Just to save anybody some time, I'm not going to be doing any chronograph reviews or anything like that. But anybody that knows or is pretty into airgun shooting knows that a 1420 feet per second airgun is way over the sound barrier, and especially with a .177 pellet, that's going to be pretty inaccurate. And the very first pellet I shot out of it was the Gamo Whisper pellet, and these are designed for these Gamo Whisper guns, and I had some pretty bad luck with it, and I got pretty discouraged, and I didn't give up on it because I know that sometimes air guns can be pretty finicky with ammunition. So this is the Mach 1, the Gamo Fusion Mach 1. This scope is a Winchester scope that has adjustable parallax. I added that onto it because the scope it comes with seems not too bad for one that comes with it. You know, it's a 3-9 by 42, but I shot probably 200 rounds of these .177 Gamo Whisper pellets, and the rounds are all over the place. It was only from 20 feet, so that's pretty unacceptable. Today I went and got some Loctite, Loctited the stock screws and the screw under the trigger, and tightened them pretty tight, just about as tight as I could go without damaging the stock. And then I let those set in, and I Loctite all the screws on the new rail that this comes with. This is advertised as a RRR rail. It's a recoil reduction rail, and it's supposed to take a lot of the stress off of the scope. And in between this part of the rail and this part of the rail, right in here in this crevice, it's hard to see on a camera, but there's two little pieces of polymer that separate them, and it's supposed to help absorb some of the recoil and take some of the shock off of the scope. So I Loctite all the screws on that. I Loctite all the screws on the scope rail. This one piece scope rail is the scope rail that comes stock with that scope in the gun. This Winchester scope is a 2 to 7 times 32, and there's no mil dots or anything. It's okay with me because .177 has flatter trajectory anyway, out of the 3 typical calibers, which are .177, .22, and .25 caliber. But having said that, the one piece is the way to go, I think, especially because on this stock one piece ring it has I forget what you call it, but it's that little screw that sticks down, and it pretty much locks into this recoil reduction rail, so it can't even move back and forth when it isn't tightened. And then especially when you tighten it down, it really locks it in tight. So everything got Loctite on this gun, and I gave it plenty of time to set in. And then I went outside and set up at about 16 feet, and I shot 3 different types of ammo, and I'll get into that in a second. But I just wanted to read a little bit to you about, read some of the stuff on the box, a little bit about the specs of this gun. It has that recoil reduction rail, which it maximizes your scope's lifespan. It has 99.9% recoil compensation, 100% consistency of shot accuracy, and it did have some pretty consistent shot accuracy today after I Loctited down everything. But yesterday, even though I tightened all the screws down pretty darn tight, I didn't have much luck with this Gamo Whisper ammo. A lot of the skirts were damaged and everything. It comes in a pretty decent package with some foam in there, and I figured that one of my good friends who just bought a Gamo Whisper, a Bull Whisper, the Bone Collector series. He really likes that gun, and he has had a lot of luck with the Whisper pellets, but I did not out of this. And it has an all-weather stock. It's pretty much some sort of polymer. The grip is kind of rubberized on the foregrip and on the foregrip and the pistol grip, or whatever you want to call this. It's rubberized with a nice texture. It does come with stock sights, iron sights, I guess you could call them, and those were pretty accurate. I had once I figured out that this scope wasn't doing too well, and I figured that I was gonna have to lock everything down, I took the scope off and I did some groups with that Gamo Whisper pellets, and I don't know, there's probably about a 2-inch group, which isn't bad for iron sights. The stock scope was, without Loctiting everything down, gave me maybe a 6 or 7-inch shot group, and obviously that's not acceptable. So more about the Gamo Whisper Fusion Mach 1. It has a custom action trigger. There's 2 different screws on the trigger. You can customize the first stage you can customize, and the second stage you can also customize. There's a screw on the trigger which does the first stage, and then behind the trigger, where typically 2-stage triggers have an adjustment, there's a adjustable screw for the second stage. And I have to say that out of any of the air guns I've shot so far, that this trigger is definitely by far the best. That's the first stage. You can see I have everything minimized to the shortest travel and the lightest possible. That's the first stage. Second stage is pretty crisp. It's probably about, it feels to me, it's about 3.5 to 4 pounds of trigger pull, and that's what it's advertised as. Let's see. Well, I'll get into the shot groups. Today I set up from about 16 feet, and I know that if you shoot anything over the sound barrier, which typically runs at about 1,060 feet per second, that pellets suffer from turbulent flight, and then they become less accurate. And so the first ones I shot today from 16 feet were these JSB Exact Monster Diablo pellets. As you can see, these are almost as heavy as an average 22 pellet. They're about they are 13.43 grains. They're pretty darn heavy, and I had some pretty good luck with those. This is the target right here. From 16 feet, you can see the group here is pretty tiny. I did 6 shot groups. I did 6 shot groups per pellet, and they're all right touching each other. So I was pretty happy with that. The next ones I shot were the Crosman Premier Dome. Everybody knows about the Crosman Premier Dome Ultra Magnum round dome pellets. These are the heavier ones. I know they make, I think the other ones they make are like 7.9 grains. These are 10.5 grain pellets. These are on the heavy side for .177s. And I actually had some pretty good luck with these as well. Of course, I did not zero the scope because I wanted to put it right in the middle so to make sure there's enough tension on the springs inside the scope so that it wouldn't jump around on me before I went ahead and tried to zero it. And then the last but not least, these were pretty horrible by any standard. The Premier Super Point. These are on the lighter side for out of the 3 that I shot. I think this is about an average weight for a .177, but these ran at 7.9 grains, and they were pretty difficult to get into the breech. I feel like every time I inserted one, it was like bending the pellet before it seated all the way in. But because this gun shoots so fast at 14-20 feet per second advertised, I mean, I'm assuming that it probably shoots with the average like 7 point. I mean, they're advertising that it shoots 14-20 feet per second with the PBA Platinum, which are alloy pellets. So obviously, with lead pellets, it's going to be quite a bit slower. I'm not even gonna throw a guess out there as far as how much slower it is, but typically when you have a air gun advertised at a certain speed, they're saying it's with alloy pellets, and then with lead pellets, it's usually about 200 feet per second slower. And then the heavier you go, obviously, the slower it goes. So I know for sure that these 13.43 grain pellets went a lot slower. But with these super points, you can see here the 7.9 grain super point. Well, it's pretty terrible. That's from 16 feet. So you can imagine, 25 yards, how that would turn out. Pretty frustrating. So obviously I'm not going to be shooting those anymore. But like I was saying, so I think the winners here, tomorrow I'm gonna shoot both the Premier Ultra Magnums and the JSBs and zero it all the way in and go out to maybe 25, 35 yards and see how they do. But I think the heavier the pellet in this gun, especially because of the inert gas technology that these Gamos are starting to, that Gamo came out with a few years, I think it was a couple years ago now, they came out with the IGT, the inert gas technology, and with the Mach 1, I believe the cylinder is 33 millimeters, which is bigger than what the other ones, the original inert gas technology cylinders are. So there's more gas inside and more gas to compress, and apparently it's more powerful. And I think the original Whisper Fusion with IGT technology, which is the nitrogen gas in a gas spring versus a coil spring, it was 1,300 feet per second. Now with the Mach 1 inert gas technology, you get 14-20 feet per second, again with the PBA Platinum ammunition. So I guess that about wraps it up. When I first got this gun, I was very frustrated and I was not happy with it. And rather than just give up on it so quickly, I Loctited it all down with the red Loctite, the stuff that you have to heat up to get it off, not the blue. The blue Loctite, can be taken off without an application of heat. You can just do it by brute force. This stuff, you tend to have to heat it up a little bit before you pull it off. And I wanted something that was gonna really lock the threads down, because this gun does have a fair amount of recoil. Most spring air guns do have, whether it's a coil spring or a gas piston, they tend to have a decent amount of recoil forward and back. And I wanted a thread locker that would really hold it down tight. This gun is pretty light itself. It's probably about 5 to 7 pounds, which is nice, especially if you're going to be out hunting with it and stuff. But because it's so light, even with like a firearm or anything, how light it is, depends on how light or heavy it is, depends on how much recoil it can hold down on its own. If you don't have to hold this thing too tight, but you also, because it's a gas piston, it doesn't really require you to do the artillery hold as much. The typical artillery hold that is taught for for any type of spring gun. With gas pistons, they're going to be less hold sensitive. I was holding this just like a typical firearm. I had my hand rested on a bag, gripping it like pretty medium, with medium strength. I wasn't babying it like you do with most spring coil guns, and I wasn't holding it like a firearm, nice and tense. I was pretty much just had a medium tension on the grip of the gun, and just making sure that I pulled the trigger straight into the rear with a pretty even trigger pull. With air guns, I tend to say you want to pull it back pretty quickly. With firearms, slow and steady, kind of surprise yourself. I just kind of did a slow and steady pull, and I was getting pretty good groups with the heavy ammunition. So I think that's about it. If you have any questions, leave a comment, and I'll try to, if anybody wants me to post another video of the groups and everything that I shoot tomorrow at about 25 and 35 yards, I'll go ahead and throw that up there. But if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you.